I heard my fiancé call my disabled son too weird to be a stepfather to 30 minutes before our wedding. They laughed. I made sure I'd be the one laughing last. My name is Rebecca. I'm 32, a certified public accountant living in a decent suburb where people smile at you in the grocery store and pretend everything's perfect. I have a 9-year-old son named Ethan who uses a wheelchair. His father walked out on us the day the neurologist confirmed Ethan would never walk. Said he didn't sign up for this and disappeared like smoke. That was 7 years ago. I thought I'd found someone different. I thought I'd found better. I was wrong. The venue was beautiful. Ivory drapes, soft lighting, flowers that cost more than my monthly car payment. I'd spent 18 months planning this wedding. 18 months convincing myself that David was the man I thought he was. The man who showed up to Ethan's therapy appointments. The man who researched accessible playgrounds. The man who got down on one knee in our living room and promised he wanted to be a family. All 3 of us. I was in the bridal suite adjusting my veil when I realized I'd left my phone in the groom's preparation room. David had borrowed it earlier to check the timeline with the photographer. I wasn't supposed to see him before the ceremony, superstition and all that, but we'd already broken half the traditional rules anyway. I figured I'd just slip in, grab it, and slip out. The door was slightly open. That's when I heard his voice. "Honestly, man, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." I froze. My hand hovered over the doorknob. David's best man, Colin, responded with a low chuckle. "What do you mean? Cold feet?" "Not exactly." David's tone shifted. Something casual, dismissive, like he was talking about a bad investment. "It's the kid, Ethan. I don't know, he's weirding, Colin. I can't see myself being a stepdad to someone like that. He just sits there staring at people, doesn't talk much. It's uncomfortable." My heart stopped. Colin laughed. Actually, laughed. "Dude, he's in a wheelchair. What do you expect? He's probably depressed or something." "Yeah, maybe. But it's more than that. He's creepy. And Rebecca's so obsessed with him, it's like I'm marrying both of them." I thought it'd get easier, but he trailed off, and I could practically see him shaking his head. "I don't know if I can do this long term. So why go through with it?" Silence. Then, because she makes good money. Stable job. Owns her house outright. No debt. If I can tough it out for a few years, I'll be set. She's already talking about putting me on the deed. The air left my lungs. "Smart," Colin said. "Just grin and bear it. The kid'll probably end up in some kind of facility eventually anyway, right?" They both laughed. I stood there in my white dress, veil pinned perfectly in place, hands trembling so hard I thought I might shatter. My son. My son. The boy who'd fought through 6 surgeries, who learned to navigate a world that wasn't built for him, who smiled at me every morning like I was his whole universe. They were talking about him like he was a burden, an inconvenience, a problem to be solved. And David, the man I was about to marry, had just admitted he was using me, using us. I could have stormed in. I could have screamed. I could have called the whole thing off right then and made a scene that would have echoed through this venue for years. But I didn't. Instead, I took a breath, straightened my veil, and I made a noise. Just a small one. A deliberate scuff of my heel against the hardwood floor. The conversation inside stopped instantly. I stepped fully into the doorway. David turned. His face went white. Actually, white. The blood drained so fast I thought he might pass out. "Rebecca!" His voice cracked. I looked at him, then at Colin, then back at David. I didn't say a word. I just stared. Colin cleared his throat and mumbled something about checking on the photographer before he practically sprinted out of the room. David stood there, frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Becca, listen, that wasn't..." I held up one hand. "Calm. Steady. Cold. Don't." He flinched. I turned and walked out. The next 20 minutes were a blur. I told the coordinator there was a delay. I locked myself in the bridal suite and sat on the edge of the couch, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My makeup was perfect. My hair was perfect. Everything was perfect. Except none of it was real. David knocked on the door. Once. Twice. Then his voice, muffled and desperate. "Becca, please, let me explain. You misunderstood. I was just venting. It didn't mean anything. I love you. I love Ethan. Please." I didn't answer. He kept talking, kept begging, kept trying to spin it into something forgivable. But here's the thing about being a single mother to a disabled child. In a world that sees you both as less than, you learn to spot a liar. You learn to hear what people don't say. You learn to protect what matters. And what mattered was Ethan. I opened the door. David's face flooded with relief. Thank God. Becca, we're going through with it. He blinked. What? The wedding. We're doing it. Everyone's here. The food's paid for. I'm not going to humiliate myself by canceling now. His relief turned to confusion. You're serious. I smiled. It didn't reach my eyes. Completely. I don't understand. You don't have to. I brushed past him, walked down the hallway, and took my father's arm. The music started, the doors opened, and I walked down that aisle like nothing had happened. David looked relieved during the ceremony, almost giddy. He probably thought I'd forgiven him, that I'd chalked it up to nerves or cold feet, that we'd laugh about it someday. He had no idea. When the officiant asked if I took David to be my lawfully wedded husband, I said, I do, with a smile that could cut glass. When David said his vows, I watched him, really watched him. The way he stumbled over the words, the way his hands shook just slightly, the way he glanced at Colin in the front row like he needed reassurance. I memorized it because I wasn't forgiving him. I was planning. See, David made a crucial mistake. He assumed I was desperate, that I needed him, that I'd tolerate anything to avoid being alone. But I've been alone before, and I survived it. Ethan and I both did. David, on the other hand, had just married a woman with a degree in forensic accounting, access to every financial record he'd ever signed, and absolutely nothing left to lose. The reception was lovely. We danced, we smiled for photos, we cut the cake, and the whole time, I was calculating. 3 days into our honeymoon, which I insisted we take without Ethan since my mother was watching him, I started digging. David thought I was relaxing by the pool. I was on my laptop, pulling every bank statement, every credit report, every tax return he'd ever filed. It didn't take long. Turns out, my husband wasn't just a liar. He was a fraud. The resort we stayed at had terrible Wi-Fi, which was ironic considering it cost me $4,000 for the week. David spent most of his time at the hotel bar, drinking mojitos and chatting up other tourists like he'd just won the lottery. In a way, I guess he thought he had. I sat by the pool with my laptop balanced on my knees, sunglasses hiding the fact that I wasn't reading some romance novel. I was reading through 7 years of his financial history, and what I found made my blood run cold. David had been married before, twice, actually. He'd conveniently forgotten to mention the second one. The first wife, Amanda, had divorced him after 2 years citing irreconcilable differences. Standard stuff. But the second wife, Lauren, she'd filed a restraining order. The details were sealed, but the case number was public record. I made a note to dig deeper when I got home. His credit score was in the low 500s. He had 3 maxed out cards, 2 in collections, and a car lease that was 4 months behind. The truck he drove, the one he claimed he'd bought outright with his savings, was leased under his mother's name. His mother, who according to property records, had filed for bankruptcy 6 years ago. He didn't have savings. He had debt, mountains of it. And then there was his job. David told me he was a regional sales manager for a medical supply company. Good salary, great benefits, company car. Except when I cross-referenced his employer's LLC registration with his tax returns, nothing matched. The company address led to a P.O. box. The phone number was disconnected. His W-2 showed income, but it was inconsistent. Some years he made $60,000, others barely $20,000. I pulled his LinkedIn. It looked legitimate enough on the surface, but when I started clicking through his connections, half of them were fake profiles. Stock photos. No mutual connections. Endorsements from people who'd never worked at the companies they claimed. David wasn't a regional sales manager. He was a con artist. I sat back in my pool chair, staring at the screen, and felt something shift inside me. It wasn't rage anymore. It was clarity. Cold, sharp, absolute clarity. This man hadn't just insulted my son. He'd targeted us. He'd seen a single mother with a stable income and a paid-off house and decided we were his next mark. I thought about Ethan. About how excited he'd been when I told him I was getting married. How he'd asked if David was going to be his real dad now. How I'd said yes because I'd actually believed it. My hands tightened around the laptop. David wasn't going to get away with this. When we got home from the honeymoon, I played the role perfectly. loving wife, happy newlywed. I smiled when he kissed me. I laughed at his jokes. I even let him start talking about our future, how we'd renovate the kitchen, maybe take a trip to Europe next year, possibly look into a bigger house. He had no idea I was documenting everything. Every time he used my credit card, just this once, for gas or groceries. Every time he made a vague comment about a work meeting that never seemed to happen. Every time he dodged questions about his paycheck or why his direct deposit hadn't hit yet. I kept receipts, screenshots, voice memos. I tracked every lie in a password-protected spreadsheet I titled Household Budget. 2 weeks after we got back, David asked to be added to my bank account. "It'll make things easier," he said, leaning against the kitchen counter with that charming smile he'd used when we first met. "You know, for bills and stuff. We're married now. Might as well combine finances." I looked up from my coffee. "You're right. Let me think about the best way to set that up." He grinned. "No rush, just whenever." I smiled back. What I didn't tell him was that I'd already opened a separate account and moved 70% of my savings into it. What I didn't tell him was that I'd contacted a lawyer the day before and started filing paperwork. What I didn't tell him was that I'd already made copies of every document in his name that I could find in our house. I was building a case. And David was too stupid to notice. 3 weeks in, he started getting comfortable. Too comfortable. He stopped pretending to look for work. He'd sleep until noon, then spend the afternoon playing video games in the living room, while Ethan did his physical therapy exercises in the next room. He never offered to help, never asked how Ethan's day was, barely looked at him. One afternoon, I came home early from work and found Ethan sitting alone in the hallway outside his bedroom, crying. I dropped my bag and crouched down next to him. "Hey, buddy, what's wrong?" He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "David said I was being too loud. He told me to stay in my room and stop bothering him." My vision went red. Where is he?" "Living room." I stood up, walked into the living room, and found David sprawled on the couch with a beer in one hand and a game controller in the other. He didn't even look up. "Did you tell my son to stay in his room?" He shrugged. "He was rolling around out here making noise. I'm trying to relax. He lives here. This is his house. It's our house now, Becca." He finally glanced at me, irritation flickering across his face. "I'm not saying he can't be out here. I'm just saying he needs to be quieter. It's not that big of a deal." I stared at him. This man, this stranger in my home who'd wormed his way into my life and was now telling my disabled son to be quieter in his own house. "To get out." David blinked. "What? Get out." He sat up, setting the controller down. "Becca, come on. You're overreacting." "I'm not overreacting. I'm telling you to leave, now." His face hardened. "This is my house too. You can't just kick me out." I smiled. It was the same smile I'd given him at the altar. "Actually, I can. This house is in my name." "Only my name. You have no legal claim to it, so either you leave on your own, or I call the police and have you removed." He stood up, his jaw tight. "You're being ridiculous. We're married, Rebecca. You can't just try me." For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then he grabbed his keys off the coffee table and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I waited until I heard his truck peel out of the driveway. Then I locked the door, reset the security code, and went back to Ethan. He was still in the hallway, looking scared. "Is David coming back?" I knelt down and pulled him into a hug. "Not tonight, baby." "Did I do something wrong?" "No, you didn't do anything wrong. Not ever." He hugged me tighter. And I made a decision. David wasn't just leaving for the night. He was leaving for good. That evening, I called my lawyer. Her name was Monica Chen, and she specialized in family law and fraud cases. I'd met her years ago through a client referral, and we'd stayed in touch. She was sharp, no nonsense, and didn't tolerate anyone trying to take advantage of vulnerable people. When I explained the situation, she didn't even hesitate. "File for an annulment, immediately. You've been married less than a month, and if you can prove fraud or misrepresentation, you have grounds. I'll draft the paperwork tonight." "What about his access to my accounts, my house?" "Change all your passwords. All of them. Bank accounts, credit cards, mortgage portal, everything. If his name isn't legally on it, remove his access, and document everything he's taken or used without permission. He's going to fight this. Let him. You have records. He has excuses. Records win." I felt a weight lift off my chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get ugly. Men like him don't go quietly. She was right. David came back the next morning, contrite and apologetic. He knocked on the door with flowers and a bag of takeout from my favorite restaurant. Becca, I'm so sorry. I was stressed. I shouldn't have taken it out on Ethan. Please, let me make it right. I opened the door halfway. You can't. His face fell. What do you mean? I mean, I'm filing for an annulment. You need to find somewhere else to stay. He went pale. An annulment? Becca, we've been married 3 weeks. You can't just... I can. And I am. Why? Because of one argument. I looked him dead in the eye. Because I know what you are. His expression shifted. Just slightly. The mask slipping. I don't know what you think you know. I know you're not a regional sales manager. I know your credit is destroyed. I know you've been married twice before and one of your ex-wives filed a restraining order. I know you targeted me because you thought I was an easy mark. I paused. And I know you called my son a creep 30 minutes before our wedding. David's face went white, then red, then something else entirely, something cold and angry. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting myself. You're insane. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. You think you can just humiliate me like this? Kick me out. File for an annulment. Make me look like a fool. I think you did that yourself. His hand clenched around the flowers. For a second, I thought he might actually try to push past me. But then he seemed to catch himself. He took a breath, forced a smile, and stepped back. Fine. You want to do this the hard way? We'll do it the hard way. But you're going to regret it. He turned and walked away. I closed the door, locked it, and exhaled. Monica was right. This was going to get ugly. Over the next 2 weeks, David tried everything. He showed up at my work, begging me to reconsider. He sent texts, hundreds of them, ranging from apologies to threats. He called my mother, my sister, even my boss, trying to paint me as unstable and irrational. He posted vague messages on social media about betrayal and gold diggers, which was almost funny considering the irony. But the worst part? He started showing up at Ethan's school. The first time, the front office called me. They said a man claiming to be Ethan's stepfather had tried to sign him out early. They'd refused, per my instructions, but it rattled me. The second time, I filed a police report. The third time, I got a restraining order. David's lawyer argued that I was being vindictive, that he had a right to see his stepson, that I was alienating him out of spite. Monica tore him apart in court. She presented David's financial records, his criminal background check, which revealed 2 prior arrests for fraud, testimony from his second ex-wife, who'd agreed to speak on my behalf, and a recorded statement from Colin, David's best man, who admitted under oath that David had explicitly said he was marrying me for financial stability. The judge didn't even deliberate. Restraining order granted, annulment approved. David was ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from me, Ethan, and our home. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Because 2 days after the ruling, I got a call from my bank. Someone had tried to open a credit card in my name, and the application had David's information all over it. The fraud department at my bank was polite but firm. They'd flagged the application immediately, something about the IP address being linked to previous fraudulent activity, and wanted to confirm I hadn't authorized it. No, I said, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles went white. I absolutely did not authorize this. The representative's tone shifted, becoming more serious. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come into a branch as soon as possible. We'll need to file a formal fraud report and freeze your credit. Do you have any idea who might have access to your personal information? I closed my eyes. Yes, my ex-husband. There was a pause. I see. In that case, I'd also recommend filing a police report. This could be identity theft, which is a criminal offense. I'll do that today. I hung up and immediately called Monica. She answered on the second ring. Tell me. I explained everything. The credit card application, the bank's recommendation, the fact that David had access to my social security number, birth date, and mother's maiden name from our marriage license application. Monica swore under her breath, which was unusual for her. He's escalating. This isn't just about money anymore. He's trying to punish you. What do I do? Everything they said, file a police report, freeze your credit with all 3 bureaus, and send me copies of everything. I'm going to contact the district attorney's office. If we can prove he's deliberately committing fraud, we can push for criminal charges. Will that actually go anywhere? Depends on how much evidence we can gather. But Rebecca, her voice softened slightly. Be careful. Men like David don't take rejection well. If he's already trying financial fraud, he might try other things. A chill ran down my spine. You think he'd hurt us? I think you should change your locks, install cameras if you haven't already, and make sure Ethan's school knows he is absolutely not allowed anywhere near your son. Better safe than sorry. I thanked her and hung up, then immediately called a locksmith. By that evening, my house had new deadbolts, a video doorbell, and 2 security cameras covering the front and back entrances. I also drove to Ethan's school and met with the principal personally, showing her the restraining order and a photo of David. If he shows up, I said firmly, you call the police immediately. Don't engage. Don't let him talk his way in. Just call 911. The principal, a kind woman in her 50s named Mrs. Patterson, nodded seriously. We'll add his photo to our alert system. I'm so sorry you're going through this. I tried to smile. Thank you. I just need to keep my son safe. We will. I promise. I wanted to believe her, but trust was hard to come by these days. The police report was filed. My credit was frozen. I'd done everything I was supposed to do, but David wasn't done. 3 days later, I got a call from my boss. Rebecca, can you come to my office? Her tone was neutral, but something about it made my stomach drop. I saved the spreadsheet I was working on and walked down the hall to her corner office. Linda was in her early 50s, a no-nonsense woman who'd worked her way up from junior accountant to CFO over 20 years. I respected her immensely, which made the serious expression on her face all the more unsettling. Sit down. I sat. She folded her hands on her desk. I received a very strange email this morning. It was sent from an anonymous account, but it contained some concerning allegations about you. My blood went cold. What kind of allegations? The email claimed you've been embezzling from the company. It included screenshots of what appear to be financial transactions, account numbers, and some internal documents. She paused. Obviously, I don't believe it, but I'm required to report it to HR and our legal team. They'll need to conduct an investigation. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Linda, I would never... I know. She held up a hand. I've worked with you for 6 years. I know your character. But you understand I have to follow protocol. Those documents, they're fake. They have to be. This is my ex-husband. He's been harassing me since our annulment. Linda's expression shifted slightly. The man you married a few weeks ago? Yes. He's already tried to open credit cards in my name. I have a restraining order against him. He's doing this to hurt me. She leaned back in her chair, processing. Can you prove the documents are fabricated? I can prove I've never had access to the accounts he's claiming I stole from. I can pull my own transaction history, my work log, everything. I'll cooperate fully with whatever investigation HR needs to do. Linda nodded slowly. Okay, I'll let them know. In the meantime, you're not suspended or anything like that. But this is serious. Rebecca, even false allegations can damage reputations. I know. My voice came out smaller than I intended. I'm going to fix this. I hope so. Because if this is what I think it is, your ex-husband just committed a crime. I left her office feeling nauseous. David had just tried to destroy my career, the job I'd worked so hard for, the stability that allowed me to provide for Ethan. I called Monica from my car. He's escalating, I said, my voice shaking. He sent fake documents to my employer claiming I've been embezzling. Monica was silent for a long moment. Then, forward me everything, every email, every document. I'm calling the DA right now. This is harassment, fraud, and possibly defamation. We're filing criminal charges. Will it be enough? It's going to have to be. The next week was a nightmare. HR launched a formal investigation into the embezzlement claims, which meant I had to sit through 2 separate interviews where I explained every transaction I'd ever processed, every account I'd ever accessed, every report I'd ever filed. The documents David had sent were sophisticated. Fake bank statements, forged signatures, altered spreadsheets, but they fell apart under scrutiny. The account numbers didn't match our system. The timestamps were wrong. The signatures were digital forgeries. It took 3 days for HR to clear me completely. We're satisfied that these allegations are baseless, the HR director told me in a formal meeting with Linda present. We'll be reporting this to the authorities as an attempted fraud against the company. I nodded, too exhausted to feel relieved. But David wasn't done. That same week, I started getting calls from Ethan's school. Parents were complaining. Apparently, someone had posted in the school's parent group online claiming that I was neglectful, that Ethan was often left alone, that I was too focused on my personal drama to care for my son properly. The posts were anonymous, but I knew exactly who'd written them. Mrs. Patterson called me in for another meeting. "I want you to know," she said carefully, "that we don't believe these claims. Ethan is well cared for, happy, and thriving here, but some parents have expressed concern, and we're required to follow up." I felt tears prick my eyes. This is him, my ex-husband. He's trying to make me look like a bad mother. I understand, and for what it's worth, I believe you. But I need to ask, is there anything going on at home that we should be aware of? Anything that might be affecting Ethan? I took a breath. Ethan knows David and I aren't together anymore. He's handling it well. Honestly, better than I expected. He's in therapy, he has a good support system, and he's doing great in school. But yes, David has been harassing us. I have a restraining order. I'm working with law enforcement. I'm doing everything I can to protect my son. Mrs. Patterson reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. Then that's what I'll document. And Rebecca, if anyone shows up here claiming to be affiliated with Ethan, we will not allow access. You have my word. Thank you, I whispered. But as I walked out of that school, I felt something inside me shift. David had gone after my job, my reputation, my son's school. He was trying to destroy everything I'd built, and I was done playing defense. It was time to go on the offense. That night, after Ethan was asleep, I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop and started digging. If David wanted to play dirty, I'd show him what dirty actually looked like. I started with his ex-wives. Amanda, the first one, was easy to find on social media. She lived 2 states over, had remarried, and seemed happy. I sent her a carefully worded message explaining who I was and asking if she'd be willing to talk. She responded within an hour. I was wondering when someone would reach out about him. Call me. We spoke for over 2 hours. Amanda told me everything. How David had love-bombed her, moved in within 3 months, convinced her to add him to her lease. How he'd maxed out her credit cards buying things for himself. Electronics, clothes, even a motorcycle he later sold for cash. How he'd gaslighted her when she confronted him, making her feel like she was overreacting or imagining things. I was so young, she said, her voice tired. I didn't know what manipulation looked like. By the time I realized what was happening, he'd drained my savings and destroyed my credit. It took me years to recover. Did you ever report him? No, I was embarrassed. I thought it was my fault for being stupid enough to trust him. It wasn't your fault, I said firmly. He's a predator. I know that now. She paused. Is he doing the same thing to you? He tried, but I caught him early. Good. Don't let him get away with it. Men like David count on women being too ashamed to fight back. I'm not ashamed. I'm angry. She laughed, a bitter, knowing sound. Good. Use that. After we hung up, I tracked down the second ex-wife. Lauren was harder to find, but I eventually located her through a mutual acquaintance on a professional networking site. I sent a message explaining the situation, and she agreed to talk. Her story was darker. David had been emotionally abusive, controlling. He'd isolated her from her friends and family, monitored her phone, accused her of cheating constantly. When she finally tried to leave, he'd threatened her, said he'd ruin her reputation, that no one would believe her, that she'd regret it. She'd filed the restraining order after he showed up at her workplace and caused a scene. He made my life a living nightmare for 6 months, Lauren told me, her voice shaking. I had to move, change jobs. I was terrified he'd find me. Did he ever face consequences? No. The restraining order expired, and he moved on to someone else. I heard he got married again, but I didn't follow up. I just wanted him out of my life. I'm sorry you went through that. I'm sorry you're going through it now. She hesitated. But if you're planning to fight back, I'll help. I'll testify, give a statement, whatever you need. He needs to be stopped. Thank you. That means more than you know. I hung up and added her information to my growing file. 2 ex-wives, both willing to testify, both with documented histories of David's behavior. But I wasn't done yet. I pulled up David's employment history and started making calls. Most of his former employers were small companies, the kind that didn't keep detailed records. But one, a medical supply distributor he'd worked for 3 years ago, was still in business. I called and asked to speak to HR. The woman who answered sounded wary. "Can I ask what this is regarding?" "I'm conducting a background check on a former employee, David Cartwright. He listed your company as a reference." There was a long pause. Then, "Hold on." A few minutes later, a man picked up. "This is Steve Kowalski. You're asking about David Cartwright?" "Yes. He worked for you as a sales associate, correct?" "Briefly. He was terminated after 4 months." "Can I ask why?" Another pause. "Look, I'm not supposed to discuss personnel matters, but if you're considering hiring him, I'll just say this: don't. He falsified sales reports, stole product samples to sell on the side, and lied to clients about delivery dates. We would have pressed charges, but he left the state before we could follow through." My heart rate picked up. "Do you have documentation of this?" "We have written warnings, termination paperwork, and a report we filed with the state licensing board. If you need copies for legal purposes, I can send them with the proper authorization. I'll have my attorney contact you." "Thank you." I hung up and immediately emailed Monica with the information. She responded almost instantly. "This is gold. Keep digging." So I did. Over the next 3 days, I contacted every employer, every landlord, every reference David had ever listed. The pattern was clear. He moved from place to place, job to job, relationship to relationship, leaving a trail of financial destruction behind him. He was a con artist, a professional one. And now I had proof. Monica filed an updated motion with the court, attaching statements from both ex-wives, documentation from former employers, evidence of the identity theft attempts, and records of the harassment campaign against me and my employer. "We're pushing for criminal charges," she told me over the phone. "Fraud, identity theft, harassment, and stalking. The DA's office is reviewing the case now. How long will that take? Could be weeks, could be months. But with this much evidence, they'll take it seriously. What do I do in the meantime? Stay vigilant, document everything, and don't engage with him no matter what he does." "I won't." But David made that hard. He started leaving things on my porch. At first, it was flowers with notes. "I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you." Then it escalated. One morning, I found a dead plant in a cracked pot with a note that said, "This is what happens when you give up on something." Another day, there was a child's toy, a small wheelchair figurine, left on the doorstep with a note. "He'll never be normal." You know that, right? I took photos of everything and sent them to Monica and the police. "He's trying to intimidate you," Monica said, "but he's also creating evidence. Keep documenting." The final straw came 2 weeks later. I got a call from my mother. "Rebecca, I just got the strangest letter in the mail." "What kind of letter?" "It's from someone claiming to be a lawyer. It says you're being investigated for child neglect and that Ethan might be removed from your custody." My blood turned to ice. "What?" It looks official, but something feels off. The letterhead doesn't have a phone number, and the language is strange. "Mom, send me a photo of it right now." She did. I stared at the image on my phone. The letterhead was fake, a poorly made forgery of a legal firm's logo. The letter claimed that multiple reports had been filed with Child Protective Services alleging that I was an unfit mother. It was designed to scare me. And it worked. But it also made me realize something. David had just made a critical mistake. He'd put his threats in writing, and threatening someone with false CPS reports, that was illegal. I forwarded the letter to Monica, the police, and the DA's office. "This is it," Monica said when she called me back. "This is enough to move forward with charges. He's committed multiple felonies, and now he's threatening you with false legal action. The DA is filing charges this week." I closed my eyes and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He's going to fight this. Let him." Because here's the thing about being underestimated your entire life. You learn to be patient. You learn to gather your evidence. You learn to strike when the moment is right. And David had just given me everything I needed to destroy him. The charges were filed on a Thursday morning: fraud, identity theft, harassment, stalking, filing a false report, 5 felonies. David was arrested at his mother's house, where he'd been staying since the restraining order. According to the police report, he resisted arrest and made threats against the officers, which added another charge. His bail was set at $50,000. He couldn't pay it, so he sat in jail, and I felt nothing, No satisfaction, no relief, just exhaustion. But then something unexpected happened. Lauren, the second ex-wife, reached out again. I saw he was arrested. I wanted you to know. I contacted 3 other women he dated between me and you. They all have similar stories. I'm organizing a group testimony. We're all willing to go on record. I stared at the message, tears welling up in my eyes. Thank you. Thank you so much. We protect each other. That's how we survive. She was right. Over the next week, Monica compiled statements from 5 different women who'd been involved with David over the past decade. The stories were horrifyingly similar. Love bombing, financial manipulation, emotional abuse, and threats when they tried to leave. The DA's office added the testimonies to the case file. David's public defender tried to argue that the charges were exaggerated, that I was vindictive, that this was a personal vendetta. Monica stood up in court and calmly listed every piece of evidence we had, every fraudulent document, every threatening message, every witness statement. The judge looked at David with something close to disgust. Mr. Cartwright, you've been charged with 5 counts of fraud and harassment. Given the overwhelming evidence and your history of similar behavior, I'm denying bail pending trial. David's face went white. Your Honor, I have a right. You have the right to a fair trial, which you will receive. But you do not have the right to continue harassing and defrauding vulnerable women while awaiting that trial. Bail denied. The gavel came down. David was led out in handcuffs, shouting something I couldn't quite hear. I sat in the gallery, my hands folded in my lap, and felt something shift inside me. It wasn't over yet, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. That night, I picked Ethan up from school and took him out for ice cream. He ordered his favorite, chocolate with sprinkles, and we sat outside in the late afternoon sun. Mom? Yeah, buddy. Is David ever coming back? I looked at my son, my beautiful, resilient, perfect son. No, baby, he's not. Ethan nodded slowly, processing. Good. I didn't like him very much. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I'm sorry I brought him into our lives. It's okay. You didn't know. No, I didn't. I paused. But I promise you, I will always protect you, no matter what. He smiled. I know, Mom. We finished our ice cream in comfortable silence. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were going to be okay. The trial was set for 3 months out, which gave me time to rebuild what David had tried to destroy. The investigation at my work concluded officially with a formal letter clearing me of all allegations. Linda called me into her office the day the report was finalized. I want you to know, she said, sliding the document across her desk, that this company takes false accusations very seriously. We've reported the incident to law enforcement, and we're prepared to testify on your behalf if needed. Thank you, I said quietly. I was terrified I'd lose my job. You're one of our best accountants, Rebecca. It would take a lot more than some forged documents to make us doubt you. She paused. How are you holding up? I considered the question. How was I holding up? I was exhausted. I hadn't slept properly in weeks. I'd lost 10 pounds from stress, but I was still standing. I'm surviving, I said finally. That's more than surviving, that's winning. Maybe she was right. Ethan's school situation also stabilized. Mrs. Patterson sent an email to all parents explaining that false allegations had been made against a family, and that the school had investigated and found them baseless. She didn't name me directly, but word got around anyway. Some parents were supportive, bringing coffee, offering playdates, sending kind messages. Others were awkward, clearly uncomfortable with the drama. A few avoided me altogether. I didn't care anymore. The people who mattered, the ones who actually knew me and Ethan, never doubted us for a second. Ethan's best friend's mother, a warm woman named Patricia, pulled me aside one afternoon during pickup. I just want you to know, she said, that what happened to you is terrible. But the way you've handled it, you're incredible. You're teaching Ethan something important, that you fight for what's right, even when it's hard. I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you. That means a lot. If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call me. Okay? Okay. It was a small moment, but it reminded me that I wasn't alone, that there were good people in the world who saw the truth. The weeks leading up to the trial were strange. David was still in jail, unable to make bail, which meant he couldn't harass me directly. But his mother started calling. The first time, I didn't recognize the number. Hello. You ruined my son's life. I froze. The voice was older, sharp, dripping with venom. Who is this? You know who this is. You got David arrested. You destroyed his reputation. You took everything from him. I took a breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Your son committed multiple felonies. He defrauded me, harassed me, and threatened my child. He did this to himself. He loved you. He wanted to give you and that boy a family, and you threw it back in his face because you're a selfish, vindictive. I hung up. My hands were shaking. She called back. I blocked the number. She called from a different number. I blocked that one too. On the fifth call, I answered and said very calmly, "If you contact me again, I will file a harassment complaint against you as well. Do you understand?" There was a long silence. Then the line went dead. She didn't call again, but it shook me, because it reminded me that David wasn't operating in a vacuum. He had people who enabled him, who made excuses for him, who blamed his victims instead of holding him accountable. His mother had probably been doing it his whole life, and that made me even more determined to see this through. Monica and I met regularly to prepare for trial. She walked me through what to expect, the questions the defense would ask, how to stay composed on the stand, what the jury would be looking for. "They're going to try to paint you as vengeful," she warned. "They'll say you were hurt by the breakup and that you're exaggerating or fabricating evidence out of spite. But we have documentation, witnesses, his entire history. I know, and that's why we'll win. But you need to be prepared for them to attack your character. They'll bring up the annulment, the restraining order, maybe even imply that you were the unstable one." I clenched my jaw. "Let them try." Monica smiled slightly. "Good. That's the energy you need." We also coordinated with the other women, Amanda, Lauren, and 3 others who'd agreed to testify. Monica arranged for them to give depositions, detailing their experiences with David. I read through their statements one evening after Ethan went to bed, and I had to stop multiple times because the words were too painful. One woman described how David had convinced her to co-sign a loan for a car, then disappeared with the vehicle and stuck her with the payments. Another described how he'd emotionally manipulated her into cutting off her family, then abandoned her when she had no one left. A third described how he'd stolen jewelry from her apartment and sold it, then convinced her she'd misplaced it. The pattern was undeniable. David wasn't just a bad partner. He was a predator who systematically targeted vulnerable women, exploited them, and discarded them. And I'd almost become another name on that list. But I hadn't, because I'd fought back. 2 weeks before the trial, I got a letter in the mail. It was from David. I almost threw it away without opening it, but something made me hesitate. I took a photo of the envelope, postmarked from the county jail, and then carefully opened it. The letter was handwritten, his messy scrawl filling 2 pages. "Rebecca, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to understand something. I never meant to hurt you. I made mistakes, I know that. But everything got blown out of proportion. I said some things I didn't mean. I was stressed about the wedding, about money, about trying to fit into your life. I shouldn't have talked about Ethan that way. I was wrong. But it was just words. I never actually did anything to hurt him. And the stuff about fraud and identity theft, that's not what happened. I was trying to help us build a future. I thought if I could get a credit card, I could cover some expenses while I looked for a better job. I didn't think you'd see it as stealing. The harassment charges are ridiculous. I was trying to talk to you, to fix things. Yeah, I left some notes, but I was just trying to show you I still cared. I'm sitting in here facing years in prison for trying to love you. Do you realize that? Do you understand what you've done to my life? If you drop the charges, I'll leave you alone. I'll move to another state. You'll never hear from me again. But please, Rebecca, please don't do this to me. I'm begging you. I know there's still part of you that cared about me. I know you remember the good times. Don't throw that away because of one bad moment. Please. David. I read it twice. Then I took a photo of it, forwarded it to Monica, and threw the letter in the trash. Monica called me within 10 minutes. This is a confession. What? He admits to the credit card attempt. He admits to leaving the notes. He's trying to manipulate you into dropping charges, but he's also confirming everything we've accused him of. I let out a breath. So what do we do with it? We add it to evidence. And we use it in trial to show the jury exactly who he is, a manipulator who refuses to take responsibility for his actions. Good. Rebecca, are you okay? I thought about it. Yeah, I am, because reading that letter just reminded me why I'm doing this. Why? Because he'll never stop. If I drop the charges, he'll find someone else to target. Another single mother. Another vulnerable woman. He'll keep doing this until someone stops him. And that someone is you. Yeah, I said. It is. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in November. I dressed carefully, a simple navy suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back. Professional, composed, credible. Monica met me outside the courthouse. Ready? As I'll ever be. We walked in together. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with wooden benches and fluorescent lighting that made everything look slightly washed out. A few journalists sat in the back. David's arrest had made local news, but mostly it was just court staff, the jury pool, and witnesses. David was already seated at the defense table with his public defender, a young man who looked barely out of law school. David had lost weight in jail. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. When he saw me, he stared with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I didn't look away. Monica touched my arm. Don't engage. Just focus on the process. I nodded. The trial took 3 days. The prosecution, a sharp woman in her 40s named Karen Mills, laid out the case methodically. She presented financial records showing David's fraudulent credit card application. She showed the fake letter he'd sent to my mother. She displayed screenshots of the anonymous posts he'd made about me online, traced back to his IP address. Then came the witnesses. Amanda testified first. She described her relationship with David calmly, detailing how he'd manipulated her financially and emotionally. The defense tried to discredit her, suggesting she was bitter about their divorce, but she didn't waver. I'm not here because I'm angry, she said quietly. I'm here because what he did was wrong, and someone needs to hold him accountable. Lauren testified next. Her testimony was harder to hear. She cried twice while describing the emotional abuse and threats. But her testimony was damning. She had text messages, emails, and police reports documenting everything. The defense tried to argue that the restraining order had expired and therefore wasn't relevant. The judge shut that down immediately. The restraining order proves a pattern of behavior. It's absolutely relevant. The third witness was David's former employer, Steve Kowalski. He brought copies of the termination paperwork and the report filed with the licensing board. He explained, in detail, how David had falsified records and stolen product. In my 20 years running that company, Steve said, I've never seen someone lie so brazenly and show so little remorse. By the end of day 2, the defense was scrambling. David's lawyer tried to paint him as a man who'd made mistakes but didn't deserve prison. He called character witnesses, David's mother, a cousin, an old friend, who all insisted David was a good person who'd just fallen on hard times. It was pathetic. Then came my turn to testify. I took the stand on the morning of day 3. Monica walked me through my testimony carefully. I explained how I'd met David, how he'd pursued me, how he'd seemed genuinely interested in Ethan. I described the wedding, the conversation I'd overheard, the decision to go through with it anyway. Why did you go through with the wedding? Monica asked. Because I wanted to understand who he really was, I said. And I wanted documentation. I knew if I canceled immediately, he'd find a way to spin it, to make himself the victim. So I went through with it, and then I started gathering evidence. What kind of evidence? Financial records, employment history, testimonies from his ex-wives, proof of his fraudulent activity. I wanted to make sure that when I took action, it would stick. Monica nodded. And when did you discover the credit card fraud? I explained the timeline, the bank's call, the police report. How did that make you feel? Terrified, I admitted, because I realized he wasn't just trying to steal money, he was trying to destroy my entire life, my job, my reputation, my relationship with my son. He wanted to punish me for refusing to be his victim. The defense attorney stood up for cross-examination. He was young, nervous, clearly outmatched. But he tried. Ms. Patterson, isn't it true that you were angry at my client for calling off the relationship? He didn't call off the relationship. I did. But you overheard a private conversation and took it out of context. There was no context that made what he said acceptable, I interrupted. He called my disabled son a creep. He admitted he was marrying me for money. That's not out of context. That's the truth. The attorney flushed. You filed for an annulment out of spite? I filed for an annulment because I discovered he'd lied about his entire identity. His job, his finances, his history. Everything was a lie. But you continued to harass him, filing restraining orders, pressing charges. I protected myself and my son from a man who was stalking us and committing fraud. Monica stood. Objection? Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained, the judge said. Move on, counselor. The defense attorney fumbled through a few more questions, but I could see he knew he'd lost. When I stepped down, I felt lighter. Closing arguments were brief. The prosecution laid out the facts: 5 felonies, multiple victims, a clear pattern of predatory behavior. The defense argued that David had made mistakes, but that prison time was excessive. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the 4 women stood. On the charge of fraud in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of identity theft, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of harassment, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of stalking, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of filing a false report, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty on all counts. David's face crumpled. His mother let out a sob from the gallery. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later. Sentencing day was quieter. The courtroom was nearly empty, just a few journalists, Monica, me, and David's mother in the back row. The judge reviewed the case, the evidence, and the victim impact statements. Then she looked at David. Mr. Cartwright, you have engaged in a systematic pattern of manipulation, fraud, and abuse targeting vulnerable women. You have shown no remorse, no accountability, and no indication that you would change your behavior if released. David opened his mouth to speak, but she held up a hand. I've read the letter you sent to Miss Patterson. In it, you attempted to minimize your actions and manipulate her into dropping charges. That letter alone demonstrates that you remain a danger to society. She paused. I'm sentencing you to 8 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 5. You will also be required to pay restitution to your victims, and upon release, you will be placed on a registry for financial crimes. 8 years. I exhaled slowly. David was led out in handcuffs, and this time, he didn't shout. He just looked defeated. His mother glared at me as she left the courtroom, but I didn't care. It was over. Outside the courthouse, Monica turned to me. How do you feel? I thought about it. Tired, relieved, maybe a little sad. Sad. Because I wanted to believe he was different. I wanted to believe I'd found someone who would love Ethan the way he deserves. And instead, I found another person who saw us as a problem. Monica's expression softened. You'll find that person someday, but more importantly, you don't need that person. You and Ethan are doing just fine on your own. She was right. We were. That evening, I picked Ethan up from school and took him to his favorite park, the one with the accessible swings and ramps. We sat on a bench together, watching the sunset. Mom? Yeah, buddy. Are we okay now? I looked at my son, his bright eyes, his hopeful smile, his unshakable trust in me. Yeah, baby, we're okay. Good. He leaned against me. I like it when it's just us. Me too. We sat there until the stars came out, and for the first time in months, I felt at peace. The update. 6 months after the trial, I got a message from Lauren, David's second ex-wife. Thought you should know. David's appeal was denied. He's officially serving the full sentence. Also, 3 more women have come forward with similar stories. The DA is considering additional charges. I stared at the message. Processing. 3 more women. How many others were out there who'd never reported him, who'd stayed silent out of fear or shame or exhaustion? I messaged her back. Thank you for letting me know, and thank you for being brave enough to testify. We did it together. That's the only reason it worked. She was right. I'd spent so much of my life feeling like I had to handle everything alone. But this situation had taught me something important. There's strength in solidarity, in women supporting each other, in refusing to let predators operate in silence. At work, things had returned to normal. Linda had promoted me to senior accountant, with a raise and more responsibilities. She said it was because of my work ethic, but I suspected it was also her way of showing support. Ethan was thriving. His grades were excellent. He'd made new friends. And his physical therapy was going so well that his doctor said he might be able to use forearm crutches for short distances within the year. But more than that, he seemed happy. Lighter. Like a weight had been lifted. One night, he asked me, Mom, Are you going to date again? I looked up from the dishes I was washing. Maybe someday? Why? Because I want you to be happy. I dried my hands and sat down next to him. I am happy, Ethan. Right now, with you, I'm happy. But don't you want someone? Someday, maybe. But not right now. Right now, I just want to focus on us. Is that okay? He smiled. Yeah, that's okay. And it was. Update. 2. A year after the trial, I got a call from Monica. You're not going to believe this. What? David tried to file a lawsuit against you from prison, claiming defamation and emotional distress. I actually laughed. You're kidding. Nope. His filing was rejected immediately. He has no grounds, and he's a convicted felon. But the audacity is remarkable. Does this mean I need to do anything? Not a thing. It's already dismissed. I just thought you'd want to know that even from prison, he's still trying to play the victim. Of course he is. Some people never learn. But I'd learned to trust my instincts, to protect my boundaries, to fight for myself and my son without apology. And I'd learned that sometimes, the people who try to break you end up teaching you just how strong you really are. Update 3. 2 years after the trial, I got an email from a journalist. She was writing a feature article about financial fraud and domestic manipulation, and she'd read about David's case. She wanted to interview me. I almost said no. But then I thought about all the women who might read that article. The ones who were in relationships with men like David. The ones who were being manipulated, isolated, drained. If my story could help even one person recognize the warning signs and get out early, it was worth it. So I agreed. The article came out 3 months later. It was titled, The Con Artist Next Door: How Financial Predators Target Single Mothers. It featured my story, along with interviews from Amanda, our Lauren, and 2 of the other women who'd testified. It detailed David's pattern of behavior and included expert commentary from psychologists and financial advisors. The response was overwhelming. I got messages from dozens of women, some thanking me for speaking out, others sharing their own stories, a few asking for advice. One message stuck with me. I've been with someone like this for 3 years. I thought I was crazy for being suspicious. Your story gave me the courage to leave. Thank you. I cried when I read it. Because that's what it's about, isn't it? Not revenge, not punishment. It's about breaking the cycle, protecting the next person, making sure predators can't operate in silence anymore. Final update. It's been 3 years now since the trial. Ethan is 12. He's in middle school, using forearm crutches part-time, and talking about joining the robotics club. He's confident, funny, and kind. Everything I could have hoped for. I'm still working as a senior accountant, and I've started volunteering with a local organization that helps domestic violence survivors navigate financial recovery. I use my skills to help women untangle the financial damage left by abusive partners, rebuilding credit, disputing fraudulent accounts, regaining financial independence. It's hard work, but it's meaningful. As for David, he's still in prison. He'll be eligible for parole in 2 years. But given his behavior in custody, including multiple disciplinary actions, I doubt he'll get it. His mother stopped trying to contact me after the first year. I don't know if she ever accepted what her son did, but that's not my problem anymore. I haven't dated since the annulment. A few people have asked me out, but I'm not ready. Maybe someday, or maybe not. Either way, I'm okay with it, because I've realized something important. I don't need someone to complete me. I don't need a partner to validate my worth. I'm whole on my own. Ethan and I are a family, a strong one, and that's enough. People ask me sometimes if I regret going through with the wedding, if I wish I'd just walked away when I overheard that conversation, and honestly, no. Because if I'd walked away, David would have moved on to someone else. He would have found another target, another victim, and she might not have had the resources or the knowledge to fight back. By going through with it, by documenting everything, by building a case, I didn't just protect myself. I protected everyone who came after me. That's not revenge. That's justice. Closing thoughts. If you're reading this and you see yourself in my story, if you're with someone who isolates you, manipulates you, drains you financially, or makes you feel like you're crazy for questioning them, please listen to me. You're not crazy. You're not overreacting. You're not alone. And you deserve better. It doesn't matter how much you've invested in the relationship. It doesn't matter how much you love them. If someone is hurting you, emotionally, financially, or otherwise, you have the right to leave. And if you need help leaving, reach out. There are organizations, hotlines, lawyers, advocates who will help you. I know it's scary. I know it feels impossible, but you're stronger than you think. I know because I've been there, and I survived. You will too. To my son, if you ever read this someday, you are not a burden. You never were. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I would fight 1,000 battles to protect you. Don't ever let anyone make you feel less than because of your wheelchair. Don't ever let anyone tell you you're not enough. You are more than enough. You are everything. And to David, if somehow this finds you, you didn't break me. You tried. You did everything you could to destroy my life, my career, my relationship with my son. But you failed. Because I'm still here. Ethan's still here. We're thriving. And you're exactly where you belong. I heard you call my son a creep 30 minutes before our wedding. You laughed. But I'm the one who gets the last laugh. And trust me, it was worth the wait.